I'm going to talk about the new Mosaic programs in the New York City subway system. Many of you have taken tours with me or have seen some of the marketing about this, but a lot of people ask me, how do you get involved and how do people get commissions to do this and what's the process? So I thought I would take some time tonight to explain that to everybody. And I'm going to give you a little bit of information about how it started and what's going on and what this whole New York City subway mosaic thing is all about. So I'm going to give you a peek into that. My company, Modern Mosaic Arts, we design, fabricate, and install architectural mosaics for residents and for residential and commercial clients. And I basically got into I had to do a lot of research for a project, and part of that research was looking at a lot of the mosaics in New York City that I was not really familiar with. So I started taking a lot of photographs, a lot of videos, and started to understand how huge the program was. And so I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about that, but I'll give you a background about the subway system. So basically, the New York City subway system is huge. It serves all the boroughs of New York City: Manhattan, Queens, Brooklyn, the Bronx, and Staten Island. Huge amount of people ride the subway every day. It was started in 1904. And basically, it was a very popular way to get around the city during the 20s and once, during the 30s as well. But after World War II, a lot of the monies that had been given to the subway maintenance program and the growth of the subways and adding new subway stops declined because everybody wanted to drive a car back and forth to the city. So a lot of the money that had been spent on subways began to be funneled into bridges and tunnels. And so basically during the 70s and the early 80s as well, there was a huge decline in the number of people riding the subways. And if you remember those times, it was kind of scary and it was lawless. So basically they had very little income. So a lot of the old stations, like the one that you see at the top there, fell into disrepair, and it's actually not even used anymore. Not because of vandalism, but basically because the tracks there are too small for the new subway cars. But the lower picture you'll see, that's what it was like in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. It was getting worse by the day. So anyway, but then in 1985, the city in the early 80s started actually doing much better. There was a lot of tax revenue coming in from Wall Street, and a lot of those monies started going back into the subway system. And there, at the time, the president of the MTA said, we should be dedicating a percentage of all of our construction to art. And so what they found out when they went and inspected a lot of the old subway mosaics and subway art in general was that the things that tended to hold up were the mosaics, particularly the mosaics that were made of smalty. And these are ceramics, but they're very small, and they're most of these ceramics that were high fire, they lasted, but a lot of the mosaics that look like this, that were the ceramic reliefs, these cracked. There was a lot of problems with them, and they had to remove a lot of them because they were in such bad repair. But they've tried to restore a lot of them by making molds and creating new ceramics, and they have been able to do that with a few of the subway stops like this. But what they found was that smalty actually held up the best. And this is another one of the ceramic reliefs. This is Astor Place Station. That last one is South Ferry, which is a really beautiful place. But this is Astor Place, the beaver, which the Astors used to represent their family. But what I want to talk about is some of the new mosaics and some of the artists that were chosen to create them. Things like artists like William Wegman, and he has a whole station covered with these cool dogs. He's a photographer. Many of you probably know him. He photographs his Weimaraners, and they chose him for one of the stations. And Lisa Dinhofer She is an instructor at NYU and at the Art Students League. She teaches pencil, drawing, and these are some of her mosaics. This is Times Square. It's called Losing My Marbles, which is what you feel like when you're down where her mosaic is. And then there's Vic Muniz, who was chosen for one of the newest stations, the Second Avenue station. I believe this is 86th Street or 96, or I can't remember. It's either 72nd or 86. But this is actually Vic, and this is him, and it's one of several characters. There's probably about 40 or 50 people in the station in these hallways. And then we have Chuck Close, who is a fine artist. He's in collections all over the world, many museums. And this is the mosaic that was made of a painting that's similar to the painting he's working on, but it really lent itself to mosaics. They're very cool up close. But what I want to talk about is basically one station and the process of how it was done. A friend of mine, Stephen Mioto, was the fabricator and installer for this. So he's told me a lot about how it worked and the process. So I'm going to go over that with you. This is the Hudson Yards stations. It's on the 7 train at 34th Street on the far west side of the city. And this is called Functional Vibrations by Zenobia Bailey, who's also a very famous gallery artist. She's been in collections all over the world. And the fabricators were Mioto Studios here in Carmel, New York, and Trevisanuto Mosaics in Spielenbergo, Italy. And Mioto Studios did the installation. So a lot of people ask me when they come on my tours, they're like, well, what's the process? How do you get involved? How can I also be involved? And this is basically what happens. MTA Arts and Design staff puts a call out to artists, and they ask for applications, and they want to see samples of your work, and it's all done online. And at the end of the webinar, I'm going to give you a link to the Call for Artists page, and they do it fairly often. But I will tell you, they tend to choose fine artists, and they do not choose people based on their mosaic skills. The fabrication is done by a separate company, and that is usually done by either Mioto Studios or Mosaic in Montreal, Canada, or Mayor of Munich. They have all 3 of those companies, and there's a few more too that they use, but most of them are done by those fabrication companies because they have the proper insurance, they have construction knowledge, they have OSHA certifications, and they also have a large staff of people that can install these giant projects. And the installer is usually chosen at the same time as the artist and the fabricator are chosen. And a lot of times the installer is the same person who does the fabrication or the same company, but occasionally they will use other fabrication, a different fabricator as an installer. So, so anyway, I want to talk to you about this particular station. Zenobia Bailey is she's mainly a fiber artist, and she's well known for these big circular crocheted doilies she makes, and they are representative of her heritage. She's from Haiti, I believe, and she likes to take her Haitian background as well as her African background and create these vibrant shapes and multiply them and make these, well, I'll show you. She also does clothing, and you can tell she just has this very interesting patchwork way of working with textiles. And I crochet and knit, but they look nothing like this. This is her with one of her pieces. And this is basically what Stephen Mioto was given as a guide to making or to fabricating the mosaics that went into this station. And so basically they were just crocheted pieces that he was then told he was to interpret into mosaic. So they spent months and months trying to figure out how to do that. And while he was, you know, trying to figure out the fabrication and working with the artist, trying to come up with a method that she liked, choosing colors and things like that, the architects were doing these plans to work with Stephen to show him how it was going to look. This is another image of what it was going to look like. And then what Stephen did is, in order to be able to create these mosaics on curves and be able to understand the scale, they made a smaller model of the different pieces, the dome, as well as this. This is the area that is right over the escalator. And this is some of the color choices in his studio. The artist came and they chose all the colors. He's got a lot of smalty that he already owns that's in his studio, but he ordered quite a bit of it from Italy. Excuse me. Sorry. But that's what they started with, lots and lots of sample colors. And this is, when the mosaic was being created, it was done in the reverse paper method. And this is what it looked like from the back. So what you're seeing is the back of the tile that's been glued to paper, and it's glued. They use rabbit skin glue, which is it's the very traditional Italian way of doing it. I actually don't really like that, but I use something else. I use flour paste and water. And this is also the back. And I just want to stop here for a second. I'm going to show you something. Does anybody have any questions about the paper method? Because what I want to do is talk to you about how the paper method works. Can everybody see this? Amy, can you see this?
Yep, we can see it.
So basically what you do is if you're going to do the reverse paper method, which is basically you're working in reverse and you're going to flip it over later when you're ready to install. So what you do is you start with your design and you transfer your design onto paper. And I use different kinds of paper depending on what it is. You can really use any kind of paper, but what most mosaic artists use is like a brown craft paper. And they use a Sharpie that's nice and thick that can bleed through the paper. And you draw your design. And then what you do is you flip it over. And on the other side, you then take your Sharpie and you redraw the design, which I don't know if you can see it here, but you redraw it. And then you stick your tiles down face down using whatever kind of glue you want. Like I said, I use a wallpaper paste that I mix up myself with flour and water. So you stick all these down, and once the whole thing is covered, it's just a sample to show you. Once the whole thing is covered with tiles and you're ready to work with it, you put on the wall, you put your thin set, and you embed this into the thin set. Now, one of the things that Stephen Mioto does that's very kind of different than a lot of other artists is that he grouts. He has one person on his staff mixing grout and applying grout, and another person applying the thin set. So he puts the thin set on the wall, and right before he puts it on the wall, they grout the back of each piece, and each piece is about 1 meter. And part of the reason why, when you're creating this, you create a grid so that you can cut it apart later. And this is a scaled down version, but usually the pieces are about 1 meter or 2 feet by 2 feet. And so basically when you're ready to install it, you cut your pieces up and put it back together like a puzzle. But what Stephen does, which is kind of interesting, like I was saying, is he pre-grouts it immediately before he puts it up on the wall. And that way, once it starts to set, the water from the grout is starting to make the paper wet, and the paper starts to peel off. So by the end of the day, they're wiping the paper off. So I want to go back to this, or let me just show you one more thing. So once they put the mosaic on, it looks kind of like this. This is no grout. This is how I do it. I grout it afterwards. But and some people say, well, you're not supposed to grout smalty. Well, when you're doing a public piece that's going to be touched and needs to be flat, you really have to grout it for several reasons, mainly because when you use this method, the reverse paper method, it makes it very smooth. So even if your tiles are all different heights, the finished product will be smooth. And usually they're using some kind of backer board like Aerolam or this, which is Weedy, and they're using a very strong thin set that is for indoor, outdoor, all kinds of temperatures, whatever the environment, the worst environment you can imagine. They're trying to create the most permanent mosaic. So this is what it looks like before I grout it, and then afterwards it looks like this. Okay, so that's what it looks like, if you can see. So that's kind of the process of the reverse method. So I'm going to go back to here. Okay, so this is the back before it was installed. More of the back. And this is you can get a feel for how these were made. This is all spread out on the floor. Excuse me. And these are, the papers underneath. You can see the paper, what it looks like here in the front. That's more of the paper pieces. And I want you to look closely at this. This kind of shows you the paper puzzle map in front of Stephen here. He's the guy in the yellow there. And what he's doing is he's got all these pieces stacked in front of him that are cut apart, stacked up in boxes, transported to the job site, and they're all numbered. And, he knows where every one of these goes so that he can easily put these pieces up on site. Does anybody have any questions so far?
There are no questions in the chat box yet. So if you all have any questions, go ahead and write them in and I will pass them along to Kathleen.
Okay. Just also while we're here, I just want to say there are 3 different ways that artists or the fabricators usually make these mosaics. It's the reverse paper, which is what you're seeing here, or you could do it on mesh as long as the tiles are totally flat, or you can do it reverse method using tile tape. And if you're a lot of the mosaics that in the Chuck Close subway stop were done using stained glass, and so tile tape worked really well for that. Reverse tile tape does not really work for tile tape. Does not work with Smalty. It just won't stick.
Kathleen, we do have a question now if you want to take it.
Okay, let me just say one thing before I take that question. This is a picture. I just want to show you what it looks like after they've put it on the wall. And if you look over on the right side, you'll see the paper that's coming off. That's the numbers. So this is a different mosaic, but I didn't have any pictures of them at this stage at Hudson Yards, but this is a different one. Okay, so where did the question?
Okay, thanks. So there's one question from Lee. She's wondering, because it's being installed on a curve and the cartoon is flat, how do they compensate for the curve?
Oh, that was really hard. I think the next image, hold on a second. Wait 1 second. I think there was one that showed that. I just want to go back to it. 1 sec. Well, what they had to do, I'll just explain it to you because I can't find the image. What they had to do
Try
was
slide 29.
Excuse me?
Try slide 29.
Slide 29?
Yep.
No, that's
the next one. Next one. Yep.
No, this doesn't.
That one shows.
I have an image
in
somewhere.
the paper.
I've included it here, but what they do, it's kind of like when they create it, they have to leave space for the curve. So they have to very carefully make some, and I do this whenever I make sinks. I have to create it and leave space for that curve, and it's tough to do, but that's why they made the models to start with, the scale models, so they could figure that out before they got started. Does that make sense? So you're not seeing the curve here. I have a picture somewhere that shows that, but I don't know if, oh, wait, here it is, here it is. Look in the very top here. You see where it looks in the blue sections where there's the kind of like rivers running through it. Those are actually breaks in the tile that are going to allow for the curve. But a lot of times when you get onto the site, you end up having to cut out sections to make it fit. It's kind of, you have to work on the fly a little bit, and if things don't work out, you just got to cut sections out or fill in if you have too much space. So this is what I was saying earlier, is this was an example of it being cleaned and the paper coming off. So this was the finished ceiling of the dome, and that's some details of it. And that is the dome, the entire dome with a panoramic camera. And this is a close-up. And this shows you a little bit better how he created the crocheted look. And what I really like about this is if you crochet at all and you've ever made circles, when the crochet pieces come together at the end of the circle, it's a little bit of an offset, and you can see he created these offsets in there so it actually looks like a real crocheted doily. It's not perfect. It's not a perfect circle, but that's what her artwork looked like. And she's really into funk music, and she had a lot of 45s from, I guess, from her childhood or from her teenage years, and she wanted to add those in to the mosaic. She wanted it to feel very funky and fun, and eventually I think they want to try to have funk music in the subway station because they do have music that is included in the subway station performances. And that's another one close up. But if you notice, I'm going to go back for one second. If you notice, the doilies have all the tiles set at a 45-degree angle. And if you look in the background, it's all done in a much more, you know, it's perpendicular. It's not at a 45. So that the way the tiles were laid keeps the doilies and the background looking different because of the texture. And that was one of the things that they worked on for quite a while. You can see that a little clearer here. And the way the tiles are laid in the background and the stripes, that style is the Spiel-Burgo style. It's more contemporary, the way they lay everything. It's a brick pattern. And you can tell when you see mosaics, you can tell that Miyota did them if there's that background in the, you know, so you have a figure in the background, you know, and the figure has all this dynamic andamento, and then you'll have a very flat background like this with the tiles at perpendicular angles to each other. And that is the roof going down to the escalator. And you can see it a little clearer there. It's pretty dark in here, so it's hard to get good shots. But it's very dramatic when you come down the stairs and see this. And there's another close-up of it. So this information I'm going to also email to everybody, and it will also be included with the YouTube video. In the information about the video, you can see all this, but I'll send out an email through Sign Up Genius giving you all this. But that's the MTA Arts and Design, that's their address, and then the submission for art. And if you're interested in ever going on any of my subway tours, you can go to my website, to my education page, or you could just go directly to TripAdvisor to this link, and it lists the tours that I have coming up. And I do half-day and full-day tours. For the mosaic artists, they usually really enjoy the full-day tours. You get to see a lot more. What else? And that is my email and phone number. If you have any questions, you can get in touch with me. Any questions about this, or if you're interested in any of the tours, I'd be glad to talk to you. So any other questions?
Thank you so much, Kathleen. That was really interesting. If any of you have questions, please type them into the chat box and I can pass them along. Kathleen, I'm curious while people think about their questions, do you have a couple of favorite stations for those of us who might be in New York without time to actually do a tour, like a top 2 or 3?
Well, if you are in the Midtown area, I would try to go see this one. This is on the 34th Street on the far west side. It's pretty impressive. But also the Second Avenue line that has the Chuck Close mosaic. It's got it's like, it's Chuck Close and Vic Muniz are really beautiful. And the William Wegman pieces are really cool too. Those are the dogs.
How would we know which stops to get off at to see them?
Basically, you'd have to send me an email and I could tell you a couple of them to go to. But it depends on where you are, because, and also it depends on if the trains are running. A lot of times on the weekends, certain lines are shut down for repair. So you have to kind of know that. But there is an MTA app that you can download to your phone that tells you what service is going on. And it's a little confusing. And sometimes I will be on my way to a station and get there and it's closed. During the week, you have a lot better luck because they don't want to keep the commuters from being able to get to work. So they're more likely to do work on the weekends. But one of my absolute favorites is out near Coney Island. It's it's Brooklyn Seeds. It's these big, beautiful flowers, gorgeous. But it's a good 45 minutes from Grand Central to get there. So it's a long way out. But there's quite a bit. And I'm doing a tour in, I think it's the 20th of June. I'm doing a half-day tour on the 19th of June. That is Manhattan, like Manhattan highlights. And then the following day, on the 20th, I'm going to be doing a off the beaten path Manhattan and Brooklyn, a full day tour with lunch. And on that tour, you'll see the one out in Brooklyn that is absolutely my favorite. It's called Brooklyn Seeds.
That's tempting.
You on the Q train, I believe.
Great, thanks. And Rhonda's wondering specifically about the Chuck Close mosaics. Do you know offhand which station has those?
Chuck Close is the Q Uptown train at 86th Street. And you got to be really careful if you take the Q Uptown that you don't actually take it to Queens. You're going uptown Manhattan. Okay. So
okay, Rhonda, you got that?
Okay. And the other one that's on that line that's really gorgeous is the 72nd Street Uptown line, Q line. It's just one stop away from Chuck Close. It's Perfect Strangers by Vic Muniz.
Okay.
And there's several on that line. So you just have to, and unfortunately, a lot of people that work for the MTA have no idea about the mosaics. You ask them and they're like, I have no idea what you're talking about. So that's why I started doing the tours, because I'm like, doesn't anybody know, so, but yeah, it's taken a while. And I'm a little reluctant to tell people different stations to go to because, like I said, a lot of times there are shutdowns, and a lot of them that are way out in the burbs, you don't necessarily want to go alone or certain times of the day. So, but if you email me, and you tell me the area you want to, you're going to go to, or there's a particular stop you want to see or a piece you want to see, just send me an email and I'll give you the info. Because there's 500 mosaics. There's quite a bit. And how you get there can be really tricky, especially if there is track work going on. So.
Okay. All right. So first of all, Lee says that you should write a book, and I second that.
I've been working on it. But you know what I think is that I'm working on as well that I think is better is I'm working on a virtual tour that'll have about 100 stations on it. I've been working on it for 2 years. And every time I'm almost finished with it, there's another station that's added, so I keep working on it. But I'm hoping to finish it soon because I get a lot of people contacting me from all over the world that can't afford to come to New York, and they really want to see the mosaics, or they're disabled and there aren't enough, only the very newest stations have elevators. So, I feel really bad for some of these people. I mean, I've been working on this, and I'm hoping to get it up pretty soon. And once I do, I'll put it up on Facebook, and I'll send it, information out to everybody. And that way you can just look at it online, and you can decide, if you want to take the trek to New York to see it. But also, what's important is that you go on to the MTA website, and you can get a map of the subway and kind of figure out exactly where you want to go and what areas the different mosaics are in. And MTA does have a website.
That's exciting. So we have a question from Rhonda about why there is no plaque that gives credit to the artist and the fabricator and the installer.
There are plaques. There are plaques at almost every station, and it usually says the artist's name and the fabricator's name at almost every stop. Some of the older ones might not, and especially the old ceramics. None of the old ceramics say it, but a lot of them, you can find out. I have a book that has all the information about the old ceramics, and that's the only thing I've ever been able to find. It was a book that was produced in 1955. I am not the person who's making these mosaics. I'm just an enthusiast, and I'm trying to make sure everybody who wants to see them gets to see them. And I tell people as much as I can about the mosaics, but I'm definitely not an expert. I just like to show people, because I'm like just in love with all the mosaics, and they're very inspiring. So I would encourage you to come in and see as much as you can. And if you want to send me an email and have any questions about, I don't like to send people just a tour route and say, here, go to all these places. And it's not because I necessarily want you to come on my tour, but it's because I don't want to be responsible for somebody having issues. I've had people actually call me and say, I don't know what I did. I took the wrong train, and now I'm out at JFK at the airport. And, the subways are complicated. So I really don't want anybody to have any issues because of a route I gave them. And it's happened. So that's another reason I started giving the tours, is because I was giving people information about where to go, and they would have a lot of problems. And I felt really bad about sending people off on journeys and they would have problems. So, yeah. So and also I do private tours for arts groups a lot, where, it's like a small museum, or I have a group from Long Island, a craft group that I'm doing a tour for in a few weeks, and Pam Good is bringing a group of people here in a few weeks that I'm going to take on the tour. But it's a little nice to have a group of people that are mosaic enthusiasts to talk to about it while we're on the trip. So, but that's pretty much why I'm doing this, and why I've been working on it for a while, because I feel like it's this huge project that just so few people actually know and are aware of. And I lived in New York City when the program first started, and I walked past mosaics every day and didn't know anything about why they were there or who did them, nothing. So I have taken a deep dive into this and just trying to share it with other people that are enthusiasts.
Well, we really appreciate it. This is a great start. And I know you've presented at the annual meeting for NEMS before, so I think some of us have gotten a few tastes, and now we're ready to come in person whenever we can.
Cool.
I don't know, there are no other specific questions here, but Amy has asked me to remind everybody that there are actually 2 more webinars coming up. One is on March 10th. Tammy McCullough is going to be talking about adhesives. And on April 29th, the educator at the Tiffany Ayer Mansion will be talking about the mosaics that are there. So those will be very different content, but probably also very interesting. And Amy, I don't know if you want to close us out, since there aren't any more questions.
Right. We will be working on the recording, and we'll be sending out an email giving you the link to the recording. It will be on the NEMS website. And we hope to see many of you on the webinar on March 10th. If you haven't registered, please go ahead to Sign Up Genius and register. Thanks for joining, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Kathleen.
You're welcome.